Chapter 8, The School Joke. On Monday morning, Benji and Mark could hear the laughing from the schoolyard 4 blocks away. "What's with that place?" asked Mark. "It sounds like someone dive-bombed the school with laughing gas. What's so funny?" "Nothing," said Benji. "Nothing could be funny in a town where no one has enough culture to buy the only French-speaking parrot in the world." "Maybe Mr. Whitehead should take out an ad in the Paris newspaper," Mark suggested with a smirk. "Very funny, Havermeyer. Don't think I've forgotten whose fault it is that Winston Churchill sounds like he's trying to pick up girls at the Eiffel Tower. Didn't it occur to you to listen to the recording first? It could have had bad words or something." "Well, at least we got the quiz done again," shrugged Mark, patting his school bag. "And Mr. Whitehead sold some stuff, even if Winston Churchill wasn't part of it. Why, the guy who won the lizard vitamins bought a whole reptile farm. Over $300, if you include the newts." They entered the playground, where the merriment was close to deafening. Nearby, a large group of students from the other 5th grade class stood rocking with helpless laughter. "So, they're fighting over this yarn, right?" roared the boy in the center. "And then Fuzzy tells Puffy to make out his will." Screams greeted this information. "I knew it," said Benji sourly. "They're laughing at Kidsview." "No, they're not," said Mark. "They're laughing at Jaworski's story. Man, I'm sorry I missed that." They tried moving away from the 5th graders, only to be greeted by, "Puffy, you're a mangy hunk of stale dog food," crowed from a 6th grade throat. "Go chase a sick mouse, Fuzzy," came the reply. "What I can't figure out," said Benji bitterly, "is why Mrs. Harris wanted that dumb story to go on Kidsview. I thought teachers were supposed to know something." "It's the oldest trick in the book," explained Mark. "When you do a project that everybody knows stinks, and your teacher makes a big fuss about how great it is, she's trying to encourage you to do more work." He grinned. "They pull it on me all the time." Ellen Louise jogged up scowling. "What a disgusting school we go to. Everybody's laughing at poor Brad." It was true. All over the playground, the story of Fuzzy and Puffy was being passed from mouth to mouth. Students who had heard the broadcast were filling in those who hadn't, and the result ranged from pandemonium to complete disbelief that the Venice Menace could have written such a thing. One last "fork over that yarn" died in the air as the author himself, Brad Jaworski, appeared on the scene. He walked slowly, making a big show of ignoring the many eyes that were upon him. Then he suddenly turned and glared at the half-circle of students that had formed. "Who heard my story on the radio Saturday?" A multitude of hands went up. "Who loved it?" The hand shot up again. Brad nodded, but did not smile. "You." He pointed to a 6th grader in the front row. "What was your favorite part?" I, stammered the boy. "I like the happy ending." "How about you?" The finger moved on to a 4th grader. "The part where it tells how Fuzzy and Puffy got their names." "I like Sister Agnes Clare," offered a little girl from the 1st grade. "Yeah, she's nice." Brad nodded approvingly. He smiled at her, stuck his jaw out at everybody else, and walked away. The group stood there, like a full theater, with no show to watch. Arthur Katz hung up his jacket and made his way across the classroom toward his desk. His eyes bulged. Not 3 steps away, his chair was rising slowly, hovering lazily at eye level. "We're losing gravity!" howled Arthur, hurling himself to the floor. He lay there trembling for a few seconds, then opened one eye and lifted it to the airborne chair. That was when he saw the wire. It was tied onto the chair back, hooked under the seat, and stretched right up to the suspended ceiling. There it disappeared under the beam, showing up again at an angle, stretching all the way to the corner of the classroom. It ended in a long fishing rod held in place by a brick, dead center on the floor in the pit. The 5 pit people were at their desks, hands folded in front of them, looking innocent. Benji glared in the direction of the pit. "Very funny. Put that chair back down." There was no reaction from the pit. Ellen Louise helped Arthur back to his feet. Benji folded his arms. I'm waiting. Oh, you're all such idiots, said Ellen Louise in exasperation. She reached up, pulled the chair down, placed it in front of the desk, and removed the wires. Here, Arthur, sit. When the whole class was seated and facing the front, there was a whirring sound as the fishing line disappeared into the ceiling and was pulled back to the corner of the room. It got away, came a voice from the pit. Ms. P breezed in a moment later. Good morning, good morning. We'll get to the independent research assignment later, but first, I want a show of hands. Who did the optional reading this weekend? Ellen Louise's hand went up. So did Mark's. You read Shakespeare? Whispered Benji. That's a laugh. Mark, what a surprise, said the teacher. Briefly summarize your impressions for the seminar. Huh? Tell us what you thought. Oh, said Mark. It was okay. I played some football, and on Saturday there was Kids View, so we dropped by the pet store, and then me and Benji... No, said Mrs. P, was growing impatient. Tell us about the optional reading. Oh, I didn't do the reading, said Mark airily. I did the option. There was cheering from the pit. So what are we going to do? Asked Mark as the 3:30 bell rang that afternoon. Why don't we run over to our animal friends and see if anybody bought Winston Churchill? Benji sighed. What's the point? We already know the answer to that question. Nobody bought him, and nobody's going to. We may as well change Kids View to the Winston Churchill hour, because he's going to be there longer than we are. Mark nodded in sad agreement. You're probably right. Who's going to pay $195 for a stupid bird? We should have listened to the parrot. He is a ripoff. You two don't think at all, do you? Said Ellen Louise, shaking her head. If Winston shows us one thing, it's how smart he is. Look how fast he learned French. Or this parrot is a ripoff. You only said it once. He's amazing. Benji was unimpressed. If he's so amazing, how come he's about to star in his 4th straight Kids View, and no one has even asked how much? Look, said Ellen Louise, Winston hasn't said the right things because we haven't taught him the right things. I'm sure all we have to do is feed him exactly what we want him to say, and he'll learn it. Come off it, Ellen, exclaimed Mark. You must have said pretty bird to him 5,000 times, and he hasn't repeated it once. No, Ellen's got a point, said Benji. He has been repeating a lot lately, just the wrong stuff. If we go to the store every day after school and drill a few real parrot sentences into his thick head, it just might work. Of course it'll work, said Ellen Louise confidently. Trust me. On Tuesday morning, Ms. P was in class early, and it was very clear that there was something on her mind. All right, people, I won't beat around the bush. I just corrected the independent research assignment, and I know what most of you are doing. Benji gulped. You do? Had she found out about the quiz? Yes, the teacher went on. On question 7, almost all of you got the same wrong answer. You put Galileo, and the correct astronomer was actually Copernicus. Now, I'm no dummy. I know what that means. Ellen Louise put her head down on her desk, unable to look her beloved teacher in the eye. Copying, thundered Ms. P. You copied from one another. That's the only way you could all make the same mistake. Benji breathed a heavy sigh of relief. She doesn't know about the quiz? Mark whispered. From the pit came terrible moaning, groaning, and sobbed-out confessions. I see I'm right, the teacher observed. I want every one of you to promise that never again will you copy each other's answers. I promise, chorused the class. Benji and Mark slapped hands under the desk. They knew no one was going to copy anything. They were going to get the answers from Kids View as usual. It took Benji and Mark all day to cheer up Ellen Louise. But we let Miss P down, she kept repeating over and over at recess. We're the ones who got let down, said Mark, by the guy who called in that stupid wrong answer. What a jerk! I've got half a mind to find out where he lives and take back his lizard vitamins. You've got half a mind, period, said Ellen Louise. But Benji laughed. The show was all that really counted. By Wednesday, the three co-producers were much encouraged. Winston Churchill was learning new words every day. He had already mastered Pretty Bird, Polly Wants a Cracker, and Come Play With Me. And he was proving himself an excellent pupil. He had trimmed his French down to Bonjour, mademoiselle, and best of all, had not said, This parrot is a ripoff, all week. Even Mr. Whitehead seemed pleased, and pleasing Mr. Whitehead was no easy task. He's the smartest bird in the whole world, said Ellen Louise firmly, as she, Benji, and Mark made their way to the office during the lunch hour. He's going to be great on Saturday. I'm starting to think so, Benji nodded happily. Of course, you know that won't make me forgive him after all he's put us through. But if some poor sap comes along and buys him next week, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. I can hardly remember what it feels like to have a new mascot of the week, said Mark longingly. Hey, what are we going to do if the bird does great and still nobody buys him? Bite your tongue, snapped Benji as they turned the corner into the office. Kids View is going nowhere but up. Look, another full sign-up sheet. He pointed to the bulletin board. 3 pairs of eyes spotted it at the same time. The very first name on the paper. Brad Jaworski? They chorused. But why? Moaned Benji, clutching at his curls. He said our show was stupid and that he was only on because his teacher forced him. Oh, it's a hoax, said Ellen Louise in disgust. All the creeps in this school are still laughing at his fuzzy and puffy story, and some wise guy signed him up again just to be funny. Do you think so? Asked Mark hopefully. Benji was staring skeptically at the list. I don't remember. Is this the same handwriting as last week? I can't tell, said Mark, squinting. Stare at it much closer and you'll go blind, said Ellen Louise. We've got to sort this out. Let's go find Brad. Now? Asked Mark. Even Benji paled a little. No, sometime next year, said Ellen Louise sarcastically. Of course now. Don't be such wimps. She grabbed each one by the arm. Come on, move it. They found Brad playing football with his usual group of 6th graders on the playground. Look, he's busy, said Mark quickly. Too bad. Ellen Louise ignored him. She marched right into the middle of the game in progress so that the ball carrier actually had to make a quick move to run around her. He lost his footing and tumbled to the ground. When he got up, he was glaring at Ellen Louise. Are you crazy, kid? We're trying to play a game here. Brad jogged up. It's okay, he told the boy with the ball. She's one of my producers. By this time, Benji and Mark had mustered the courage to join Ellen Louise. Brad, there seems to be some kind of mix-up with the Kids View sign-up sheet, Benji ventured. Mix-up? Asked Brad. Well, yeah, said Benji. Your name's on it, and we remembered how you hated the show and how stupid you think it is, and... No? Brad was shaking his head impatiently, so Benji fell silent. All that's changed now, said the Venice Menace. I just wrote a sequel to my story, since everybody liked it so much. A series of gasps came from the other players. You're kidding, croaked Mark. Brad faced him, face darkening. I never kid. Got it? His eyes narrowed. Hey, you did like my story, didn't you? Yeah, cried Mark. Of course I did. Loved it. I mean, I had to work in the other studio while you were reading, but everybody I talked to says it was the best story they ever heard. The other players all had stricken half smiles on their faces as the urge to scream with laughter was held under control by fear of the Venice Menace. What's the new story called? Asked Ellen Louise. Brad paused for dramatic effect before announcing, The Further Adventures of Fuzzy and Puffy. This time, a barrage of snickers broke from Brad's fellow players. He wheeled to face them, glowering. "What do you think?" "Great," chorused everybody. Brad nodded without smiling. "I was thinking of calling it More Adventures, but then I decided Further sounds better." The players took a vote, and sure enough, Further Adventures got the nod, 11-0. "Are you sure you want to do the new Fuzzy and Puffy so soon?" asked Ellen Louise diplomatically. "I mean, it'll only be a week after the first one." "Next Saturday," said Brad with a look that had Benji preparing to offer him the entire show. "And one more thing. When you first get on the air, driver, mention that my new story is coming up later. Kind of a, a teaser?" asked Benji. "Yeah," said Brad, "so that everybody who liked my first story will want to stay tuned. That's good broadcasting." "Got it." Benji was seething all the way back to the school building. Can you believe it? A musclehead like Jaworski telling us what's good broadcasting. The author of Fuzzy and Puffy. I suppose he likes dead air too. "Shh," hissed Mark. "Are you crazy? What if someone hears you? The walls have ears, you know." "The worst part," said Ellen Louise, "is that the whole school is laughing at Brad behind his back, and he doesn't even know it. He really seems to think everybody loved his story." "Good thing, too," said Mark feelingly. "He's got us outnumbered. One of him and only 600 of the rest of us." "The bottom line is that we're the guys who have to broadcast the school joke on Saturday," Benji grumbled. "This isn't exactly making Kids View look so hot." "There's only one thing to do," Ellen Louise decided. "You guys have to talk with Brad and explain how everyone's making fun of him." Mark stared at her in disbelief. "You're crazy. I suspected it when you liked the seminar, but now I'm positive. You want us to tell the Venice Menace that his stories stink. Yeah, right. Every day of the week." "If it's so important, why don't you tell him yourself?" added Benji. "This is the kind of thing he has to hear, man to man." "Well, if you run into any men," said Mark, "get them to do it. We're kids, mere children, 5th graders, and too young to die." "Aw, calm down, kid. I didn't mean it." Benji sat on the backyard swing set, Aaron on his knee. She was bawling loudly, her face bright red and teary. Lying on a fluffy towel, drying in the sun, was Broadcasting Is My Life, the autobiography of Eldridge Kestenbaum. "It's Mom's fault, not yours," Benji continued. "She never should have let you eat that second helping of oatmeal. Not when you were sitting so close to my book." Aaron howled louder. Okay, I didn't mean to yell at you. It's just that when you spit up on Broadcasting Is My Life, I lost my head. That book means so much to me. I remember checking bookstore after bookstore in every town we visited on vacation. This is all before you were born, kid. And then one day, at the Harrisburg airport, Mom was buying one of those romances she likes, and she dropped her change. I bent down to pick it up, and there it was. The floor was uneven, and a copy of Broadcasting Is My Life was jammed under the shelf to keep it steady. Maybe the last copy in the whole world. So you have to understand that I took one look at my beautiful book with all that half-digested oatmeal on it, and I went nuts. I'm under a lot of pressure, Did I tell you that Jaworski's back for another Kids View? He shuddered. Anyway, don't worry. I washed all the stuff off, and it's drying perfectly. She was still crying, and Benji felt guilty. He tried bouncing her on his knee, to no effect. As a last resort, he put on his best broadcasting voice. "You are tuned to FM 92.5. No result. "Come on, FM 92.5. At last, Aaron emitted a watery giggle. "0.5, she corrected. "0.5, that's right. And the winner is the baby." On Friday, Ms. P handed back the poetry analysis tests that the seminar had taken the day before. Mark stared at his paper. Oh no, 7 out of 60? I'm dead. Benji pointed to his own score, 9 out of 60, and said, I guess you didn't study as hard as I did. He made a face at Ellen Louise, who was flaunting her 58. Actually, admitted Ms. P, I see now that the test may have been a little too difficult. So anyone with 10 gets A, 8 gets a B, 6 gets a C, and so on. She smiled. I'm very impressed with your efforts. This seminar certainly is coming along nicely. She beamed at Benji. I'm so pleased at the achievements of you young people that I'm going to make a point of listening to your show this weekend. A burst of applause from the pit covered up the triple gasp from the producers. If Miss P listened to Kids View, she'd find out that the weekly trivia quiz was stolen from the independent research assignment. The teacher smiled even wider. Would you believe my old radio was damaged during the move, and I've been without one ever since I've been in Venice? But I've ordered a brand new one, and it's being delivered today. So when you're in the studio tomorrow, you can bet that I'll be tuned in. It's 92.5 on FM, right? .5. Benji corrected miserably. If Miss P could get so upset thinking her students were doing a little copying, what would happen when she listened to the show and found out her research assignment was WGRK's trivia quiz? Mr. Whitehead folded his arms in front of him and leaned against the cash register. All right, what's so important? Ellen Louise spoke up. We thought you should know that we're stopping the quiz. Mark braced himself for a tantrum, but the sponsor just said, No, you aren't. But, Mr. Whitehead, we have to, she pleaded. You see, we have a little confession to make. So do I, said the storekeeper. I confess that my sales are way up since the quiz, and it's not just because of the prizes I give out. More people are listening to Kids View than ever before, especially for the quiz. It stays. But please, Mr. Whitehead, began Ellen Louise. Wait a minute, Benji interrupted. Suddenly the big problem was gone from his mind. He was the host of a hit show. What are the ratings? Which age group are we strongest with? Are we number 1 in our time slot? What's our market share? You're not selling any parrots, if that's what you mean, said the sponsor sourly. Everywhere else, you're okay, thanks to the quiz. The corners of his mouth turned downward. No quiz, no show.